Imagine being born into a world where your very existence is a crime. A baby placed in a basket floating on a river, and then raised in a palace. A man who would challenge the most powerful empire on earth. This is not just a story, it's a journey of faith, miracles, and an unbreakable destiny. Stay with me till the end, because you're about to witness the complete, untold story of Moses like never before. From the moment Moses was born, danger surrounded him. Pharaoh, the mighty ruler of Egypt, had given a terrifying order. Every Hebrew baby boy must be thrown into the Nile. Imagine the fear gripping the hearts of every mother, knowing their child's life was in danger. But one woman refused to accept this fate. She carefully placed her newborn in a woven basket, coated it to keep the water out, and set it afloat on the great river. Imagine her heart pounding with every ripple, every wave, as she watched her son drift away, not knowing if she would ever see him again. Would he survive? Would someone find him? Or would the mighty river swallow him forever? Then, something incredible happened. The basket floated into the hands of someone unexpected, Pharaoh's own daughter. Of all the people who could have found him, it was the princess of Egypt. Instead of following her father's cruel law, she did something no one could have imagined. She took him in as her own son. Just like that, the Hebrew baby, meant to be destroyed, became a prince of Egypt. But here's the twist. Moses' real mother was secretly chosen to nurse him. She got to hold her son, whisper to him, and tell him about his true identity, all while he lived as an Egyptian prince. Little did anyone know, this child, saved by a mother's love and raised in a palace, would one day stand against the very empire that took his people as slaves. Moses' story is not just about survival, it's about destiny. He was born to lead, but before he could do that, he had to face betrayal, exile, and an encounter with God that would change everything. And that's where our story truly begins. Pharaoh's throne room was filled with tension. His advisors had brought troubling news. The Hebrews are growing too strong. Fearful of losing control, Pharaoh made a ruthless decision. Every newborn Hebrew boy must be thrown into the Nile. Soldiers stormed Hebrew homes, searching for infants. Screams filled the air as mothers tried to hide their babies. It was a time of terror. But amid the darkness, one mother refused to give up. Jochebed cradled her newborn son, knowing she had little time. She crafted a small basket, sealing it with tar and pitch to make it waterproof. With tears in her eyes, she placed her baby inside, whispering a prayer. As she pushed the basket into the river, her heart pounded. Would he be safe? Would someone find him? The tiny vessel drifted away, carrying not just a baby, but a future leader. Downstream, Pharaoh's daughter, Princess Bithiah, was bathing when she noticed something unusual. A small basket caught in the reeds. She signaled her servants to retrieve it. As she lifted the cover, her eyes met those of a crying infant. She gasped. This is one of the Hebrew babies. She should have obeyed her father's command, but something stirred in her heart. Defying Pharaoh's law, she decided, I will raise him as my own. Miriam, the baby's sister, had been secretly watching. Seizing the moment, she approached the princess. Shall I find a Hebrew woman to nurse him? She asked. Bithiah nodded. Moments later, Jochebed stood before the princess, barely able to hide her shock. Take care of him, Bithiah said. Jochebed embraced her son, knowing this was a miracle. For the first few years of his life, Moses was raised by his own mother, learning about his Hebrew roots before entering the grand halls of the Egyptian palace. Moses grew up as an Egyptian prince, surrounded by luxury and power. He wore royal robes, dined with nobles, and learned the ways of the pharaohs. Yet, deep inside, something felt off. He looked like an Egyptian, spoke like one, but he wasn't one of them. He was a Hebrew, the very people enslaved under Pharaoh's rule. As Moses walked through the grand halls of the palace, he couldn't ignore the whispers, the pain of his people, the suffering of the Hebrews building Pharaoh's cities. And though he was raised as royalty, destiny had a different path for him. Little did he know one moment of anger would change his life forever. Imagine living in a palace surrounded by gold, power, and servants, yet knowing deep down you don't truly belong. Moses had everything: wealth, education, influence, but one truth haunted him. He was not an Egyptian. He was a Hebrew, born from a people suffering under the weight of slavery. One day, as he walked through the labor camps, he saw something that shook him to his core. An Egyptian taskmaster was mercilessly beating a Hebrew slave. The man cried out in pain, struggling under the heavy whip. Moses' heart pounded. The injustice, the cruelty, it was too much to bear. Without thinking, he acted. He grabbed the taskmaster and struck him down. Silence. The man lay lifeless at his feet. Reality crashed down on Moses. He had just killed an Egyptian. He quickly buried the body in the sand, hoping no one had seen. But the next day, his worst fear came true. Two Hebrew men were fighting, and when Moses tried to intervene, one of them snapped. "Who made you ruler over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Moses froze. His secret was out. The very people he thought he was helping had turned against him. And then, the final blow, word reached Pharaoh. The ruler who once considered Moses his grandson now wanted him dead. Moses had no choice. He ran. Out of the palace, out of Egypt, into the vast and merciless wilderness. His life as a prince was over, but his journey as a leader was only beginning. 40 years had passed. The mighty prince of Egypt was now just a simple shepherd, tending his flock in the barren wilderness of Midian. The golden halls of Pharaoh's palace were nothing but a distant memory. The fire of ambition that once burned in his heart had long faded. He was just a man, lost in the vast emptiness of the desert. Then something happened. One day, as Moses led his sheep through the rocky terrain, his eyes caught something unusual. A bush, engulfed in flames, yet not consumed by the fire. He blinked, thinking it was an illusion. But no, the fire burned bright and fierce, yet the leaves remained green, untouched by the heat. Curious, he stepped closer. Then, a voice thundered from the flames. "Moses! Moses!" He froze. His heart pounded. The voice was powerful, yet filled with an authority beyond anything he had ever heard. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Trembling, Moses obeyed. This was no ordinary fire. This was the presence of God himself. Then came the command that would change the course of history. "I have seen the suffering of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries. And now, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring them out of slavery." Moses' blood ran cold. Go back? To Egypt? The very place he had fled from? He shook his head. "Who am I to stand against Pharaoh? I am no leader, no warrior, no hero." But the voice responded with words that echoed through time. "I will be with you." It was not about Moses' strength, his skills, or his past. It was about the power of the one who had called him. Still, Moses hesitated. What if they don't believe me? What if they ask who sent me? Then, for the first time, God revealed his name. "I am who I am. Tell them, I am has sent me to you." This was the moment. The turning point. Moses, the fugitive, the forgotten shepherd, was now chosen to stand against the most powerful empire in the world. And so, with nothing but a staff in his hand and the promise of God in his heart, Moses turned back toward Egypt. A storm was coming, and Moses was about to shake the foundations of Pharaoh's kingdom. The sun blazed over the grand halls of Egypt as Moses and Aaron stepped into Pharaoh's throne room. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the golden walls gleamed, reflecting the arrogance of a ruler who believed himself to be a god. Moses, once a prince of Egypt, now stood as a prophet of the Almighty. He lifted his staff, his voice unwavering. "Pharaoh, the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, let my people go." A hush fell over the room. Then Pharaoh laughed, a cold, dismissive laugh that echoed through the grand chamber. "Who is this Lord that I should obey him? I do not know him, and I will not let Israel go." Moses did not flinch. He knew this moment was coming. Pharaoh's heart was hardened, but God had given him signs. With a firm grip, Moses cast his staff onto the marble floor. Instantly, before the eyes of Pharaoh and his court, the wooden staff twisted, coiling, transforming into a living serpent. Gasps filled the air, but Pharaoh smirked. With a wave of his hand, he signaled his magicians forward. They too threw down their staffs and threw their sorcery. They also became serpents. The court murmured in awe, but then the unexpected. Moses' serpent moved swiftly, devouring the others one by one. The room grew silent. Pharaoh's face darkened, but he was not ready to surrender. "A mere trick," he scoffed. "The slaves will remain. Moses stepped closer. If you refuse, Egypt will suffer under the hand of the Almighty. The river will turn to blood. Plagues will sweep your land. Your people will cry out, but still you will not listen. And then, Pharaoh, you will know who the Lord is. Pharaoh's eyes flickered with defiance. He rose from his throne and pointed toward the doors. Leave, now. Moses and Aaron turned and walked out. But they knew this was only the beginning. Egypt was about to witness the power of God like never before. And Pharaoh? He had no idea what was coming. Moses returns to Egypt, no longer a prince but a prophet. Pharaoh laughs at his demand, "Let my people go?" The first miracle. Moses' staff turns into a serpent. The warning: if Pharaoh refuses, Egypt will face the wrath of God. Moses stands before Pharaoh, not as a royal, but as a messenger of God. The battle for Israel's freedom is about to begin. Moses stands before Pharaoh once again, his voice unwavering. "Let my people go!" But Pharaoh scoffs, dismissing the warnings. He is the ruler of Egypt, the most powerful man in the world. Why should he fear the god of slaves? Then, the unthinkable happens. The mighty Nile River, Egypt's source of life, turns to blood. The waters run red, fish float lifeless, and the stench fills the air. People rush to their wells only to find them poisoned. Panic spreads, yet Pharaoh refuses to yield. Then come the frogs, hordes of them, pouring into homes, beds, ovens. People scream as they find them in their food, their clothes, even their beds. Pharaoh, desperate, begs Moses to make them disappear. But when they vanish, he hardens his heart once more. Next, a plague of gnats rises from the dust, swarming over Egypt, biting people and animals alike. Then, a dark cloud of flies descends, filling the air, making life unbearable. Disease spreads among livestock, wiping out Egypt's wealth. Painful boils break out on people's skin, covering them in sores. Pharaoh begins to waver, but his pride holds firm. Then, hail falls from the sky, mixed with fire, shattering crops, trees, and homes. The land is devastated. But Pharaoh still refuses to let the Israelites go. Next comes the locusts, millions of them, devouring whatever is left. Egypt, once a land of abundance, is now a wasteland. Then darkness. Not just night, but a thick, suffocating blackness that covers Egypt for 3 days. No one can see, no one can move. It is as if the entire nation is buried alive. Yet Pharaoh's heart remains like stone. Then Moses delivers the final warning, the deadliest plague of all. The firstborn of every Egyptian family will die. Rich or poor, noble or slave, no one will be spared. But the Israelites will mark their doors with lamb's blood, and death will pass over them. Still, Pharaoh refuses to listen. Then, on one dreadful night, the cries of Egypt rise to the heavens. The firstborns are gone. Even Pharaoh's own son lies lifeless. Egypt is shattered. And finally, Pharaoh speaks the words Moses has waited to hear. Go, take your people and leave. But this is not the end. Pharaoh's pride is not so easily broken. The story is far from over. Pharaoh finally lets the Israelites go, but their journey is far from over. With their belongings packed and hearts full of hope, the Israelites leave Egypt, following Moses toward the Promised Land. The night is filled with celebration, yet uncertainty lingers. They are free, but what comes next? As they travel, they reach the shores of the Red Sea. A vast, impassable barrier lies ahead. Just when they think they can rest, a terrifying sight appears on the horizon: Pharaoh's army. Pharaoh has changed his mind. Furious that he let his workforce go, he sends his soldiers, horses, and chariots racing after them. The sound of pounding hooves and clanking metal grows louder. Fear grips the Israelites. "Moses, why did you bring us here? Were there no graves in Egypt?" They cry out in despair. But Moses stands firm. He turns to the panicked crowd and declares, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord." Then something incredible happens. God commands Moses to lift his staff over the sea. A powerful wind begins to blow. The waters tremble. Then, miraculously, they part, forming towering walls on either side. A path of dry land stretches before them. With no other option, The Israelites step forward, crossing through the sea. The ground beneath them is firm. They move quickly, their hearts pounding with every step. Pharaoh's army arrives at the edge of the water and without hesitation charges in after them. The chariots rumble through the path, soldiers shouting orders as they pursue their escapees. But the moment the last Israelite sets foot on the other side, God commands Moses once more. Moses lowers his staff. The walls of water collapse. A mighty roar fills the air as the sea crashes down, swallowing Pharaoh's army whole. Horses, chariots, and men disappear beneath the waves. Silence. The Israelites stand on the other side, watching in awe. The army that once enslaved them is gone. Pharaoh's power is shattered. They are truly free. A wave of realization washes over them. They lift their voices in praise, singing to the Lord. The horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. Yet their journey has only begun. Ahead lies the vast wilderness, a place of trials and tests. Will they trust in the God who parted the sea, or will fear and doubt creep in once more?